This is our final talk in our little series on the double binds that people face in recovery. And what it really is that a child has these great instincts coming into the world about being authentic, about trusting, about connecting, about loving. But in complex trauma, all of those good instincts led to pain, led to being hurt, led to judgment. And so they had to adapt, and they had to develop new tools, survival tools, where they shut down all of these good instincts and did other things that kept them safe. But what they find is they get to adult life, and all of a sudden these new tools, these survival tools, aren't working. They realize they were maladaptive. They're now causing my relationships to not be healthy. They're causing hurt in those relationships to yourself and to the other people. And so they go, I want to change. I want to go back to being authentic. I want to go back to connecting and trusting. But as soon as they want to go there, it's like, something bad's going to happen. And they're caught. They feel trapped. I don't want to continue to not be authentic, but I'm afraid to be authentic. A double bind. Part of them is pulling them to be not authentic because that's worked in the past. Part of them is saying, no, I got to be authentic. And it's a powerful war inside their brain. Everybody goes through it. And we've been looking at 20 different common double binds that people face in trauma recovery. So I want to cover the last 5 today. Hopefully this is helping validate some of the stuff that you're going through and giving you some practical tools for moving past these double binds. So the next one is the double bind that comes around expressing needs and emotions. So part of what was necessary in complex trauma was not expressing your needs and not expressing your emotions. Because if you did express your emotions, you got punished, you're too sensitive, you're too angry, and you got in trouble. Or if you expressed a need, you were told you're selfish, you were told no, that need wasn't met. So expressing your needs, expressing your emotions led to pain. It led to negative things for you. And so what does a child do? They learn to shut down their emotions, shut down their needs, but they started believing that they were wrong. They were selfish for having needs. They were weak for expressing emotions. And so they developed a whole belief that helped them justify shutting down their needs and not expressing their emotions. And then they made everybody else's needs and everybody else's emotions more important than their own. That was part of their survival too, and they got rewarded for that. So it seemed like the right thing to do. But now in adult life, they're not aware of what their needs are. They're not aware of what their emotions are. They're aware of everybody else's needs and emotions, but not their own. They find their own emotions quite annoying. They often think that, who needs emotions? But part of them is beginning to realize that emotions lead to a very fulfilling life. It's not just painful emotions that were shut down. It was good emotions too. And so there's an emptiness now in their adult life that they want emotions back, but they're afraid of letting emotions back. They want to get their needs met again, but they're afraid of authentically expressing their needs because they're afraid they're going to be selfish, they're going to be judged, they're going to be rejected. And so this is the double bind that I had to shut down 2 key parts of my humanity, my needs and my emotions, to survive. To get healthy, I have to bring those things back online, but to bring them back online creates all kinds of negative feelings and fears. Fears that I'm being selfish, fears that I'm going to get rejected or hurt, that people are going to think I'm too much. So that is the double bind around expressing needs and emotions. And many of you can relate to that. So what helps? Just a couple things. Number 1, most need to begin by getting in touch with what are my needs? What are my emotions? I know what everybody else's are, but I don't have a clue what mine are. So take time every day to get in touch with your needs, your emotions, your body. What sensations am I feeling? What emotions am I feeling? What needs am I aware of? Go through a list of the 12 needs, go through an emotions wheel, and begin to go, okay, which one of these can I get in touch with, until you gradually become better and better at identifying and being aware of your needs, emotions, and body. Then, with a safe person, begin to tell them what you need and what emotions you're feeling. See, the problem for the child in complex trauma was they tried to do that, but it was with an unsafe person. That's why they got hurt. That's why they got judged. So with one safe person or with a small group, begin to open up. And what you will find is you don't get judgment, you don't get punishment, you get acceptance. You get people responding with appreciation, people meeting your needs. It is a positive experience. And then learn to express emotions, but start in small doses. So part of the fear for many people is, how do I express my anger? I was never allowed to, but I'm afraid if I let my anger out a little bit, it'll just take over and I'll lose the ability to rein it in and I'll do all kinds of damage. So begin in really, really small doses to let a little bit of anger out and then pull it back in. Let a little bit of sadness out, then pull it back in. Let a little bit of whatever emotion out, then pull it back in. Just, you're getting the feel of it. You're learning tools to express it, to manage it, to make sure it doesn't take over, doesn't go to unhealthy. And often you need a therapist or a coach to help you begin to develop all of the nuanced tools necessary to begin to do this well. The next double bind comes around self-compassion. This one is huge for many people. So what happens in complex trauma is usually two things. Often there's an element of a parenting style that children grow up with where parents are very hard on kids. And so the goal of the parenting was to get kids who will obey, who were tough, who could survive and be successful in this world. So they took a hard approach. Lots of discipline, not a lot of tenderness, not a lot of emotional warmth and softness and nurturing. It was, you got to be tough. If you fail, we're going to come down on you hard and punish you hard so you don't do that again. If you are struggling, we're not going to go soft nurturing. We're going to get over it, toughen up. And so there was this very harsh, hard, sometimes cruel element that they thought was going to create better, stronger kids who didn't fail. And so what comes out of that is the child begins to believe that's how they need to parent themselves. So if they're struggling, instead of being compassionate to themselves, they get hard on themselves. They get critical of themselves. They beat themselves up. You're a loser. You're weak. You can't do anything right. You're lazy. You're selfish. And they just go down that road. Or if they fail, you deserve to be punished. If I was to forgive myself now, if I was to be kind to myself now, that would be letting myself off the hook. That would be saying it doesn't matter that I fail. So I got to put myself in the doghouse for a week and be really hard on myself. That's the only way to make sure I don't fail again. But here's what I want you to understand. That kind of parenting might have, in the short term, led to improved behavior. But when it becomes the normal, it's a very negative, critical, cold, harsh environment that's not meeting key needs that a child has for acceptance, understanding, nurture, forgiveness. And over time, it actually leads to greater failure. Over time, it actually leads to, what's the point? I can't do it, right? So give up. And so this harsh, cruel, tough approach, if that's all there is, and there's no nurture, no gentleness, no empathy, it backfires. And so for many, many people, what's important to understand is a child who's in survival mode, they can't go easy on themselves. Because if they're easy on themselves, they might drop their guard and they could be destroyed. They have to be constantly on guard, constantly hard on themselves, never giving themselves a break, never relaxing. That's what they had to do to survive. If you're with safe people now, that kind of person is incapable of healthy relationships. That kind of person isn't a good parent to children. There's all kinds of negative consequences that start coming out of that. And so what I want people to understand is what the research is showing us is that for a person to get healthy, there has to be a balance between, a certain amount of toughness and discipline and pushing myself at times. But there's got to be a lot of self-compassion. There has to be forgiving myself, being kind to myself. And for most people, that just feels wrong. That's where the double bind comes in. That just feels like I'm being soft, that something bad's going to now happen. And so there's a strong pull in them to want to go back to being hard on themselves. And so it's so important to begin to realize that what the research shows is the greatest quality necessary to bring lasting change is self-compassion. So learn to not beat up that little child in you that was trying to survive. Learn to be kind to that little child, to nurture that child, to spend time with that child, to hug that child, to love that child, to forgive that child. All of that is so important. Now, understand that your limbic brain is going to go, no, I got to be hard on myself. That's your limbic brain going back to the old programming. Get to your cortex and go, okay, I'm going to try self-compassion. It feels wrong. Something in me resists it, but I'm going to give it an honest try and see what happens. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the good results that come out of that. The next double bind is around being a victim. So the child in complex trauma was a true victim of narcissistic parents, of abuse, of neglect. And they were a true victim because they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't resolve it. They couldn't run away from home. They were a victim that becomes this helpless victim that often began to feel hopeless in their victim status. And so that's why they had to go to maladaptations, because healthy responses weren't getting them out of all of the pain and problems. But what happens now is they come into adult life, and as soon as life starts to feel difficult, a bit overwhelming, they can quickly go to feeling or believing they're a victim again. I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do. I might as well give up. They blame everybody else. They go to counselors hoping counselors will fix them. They try to get everybody else to rescue them. They look for these magic fixes. They do all of this stuff. People give them wonderful advice, but they don't follow it because they feel helpless to do anything to improve their situation. So they don't have the sense of agency that they can make a difference because they've never been able to make a difference. So part of what happens in adult life now is they hate feeling like a victim, but they feel helpless to get out of that. They're afraid to get out of that. If I'm not a victim, then people aren't going to rescue me. If I'm not a victim, then I'm going to become responsible. Then I'm going to have to change. What will then people expect of me? They're caught. It's a double bind. And so they continue to go looking for magic fixes, outsourcing their recovery to others, blaming everybody else, staying stuck in victim status, victim mentality, wanting to get responsible and change, but afraid to move into change. So again, what helps? So I think it's important just to start breaking down the changes necessary in life into little baby steps. And don't try to do them all at once. Just pick one little baby step and say, okay, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to be responsible for this today. And you begin to gradually develop agency. You begin to gradually take responsibility for what happens in your life. And over time, there's an accumulation of those decisions that you begin to feel more and more that, hey, I can do something here. I am not a victim here. It feels like it, but I'm not. Many people need, again, a coach, a mentor that will help them in the early stages, because as soon as they go into difficult situations, it's like their brain shuts off. They feel helpless. They feel paralyzed. They don't know how to think through it. They don't even know how to think of options. They need somebody to walk beside them and say, what about this? Let's think about things we could do in small areas that would make a difference. Then they learn from that and they begin to develop tools. The next one is a double bind around security. So complex trauma, most children don't have a good sense of security. They might have a sense of physical security, but not emotional security. They're not safe emotionally. Or they might not even have a sense of physical security because they don't know if there's going to be food in the fridge. They don't know if they're going to get beaten up tonight, whatever. So there's lack of safety in their physical world or their emotional world that causes them not to feel a sense of security. And so what can happen with that is they have to then create a sense of security somehow. And so this is where people can then go to almost OCD-like behaviors. I have to cover every detail of life to make sure I'm safe. Or I have to overthink every situation to make sure I'm safe. Or I'm attracted to an organization that is very black and white. Lots of rules. I always know where I stand. I always feel that I'm doing a good job, so I feel secure. I have to be in control all the time in order to feel safe. I have to have lots of money in the bank, lots of possessions in order to feel safe and secure. So they develop all kinds of different ways of trying to gain security. But they get to adult life and a hurricane hits and they lose all their possessions. They begin to realize that this very rigid belief system is causing them to hurt a lot of people in their life and be self-righteous and judge other people and not be very loving. And so they begin to realize all the things that I'm hanging on to for security aren't really creating security. They could be wiped away. They're actually causing problems. But I'm afraid to give it up. Because if I give up the belief system, if I give up the control, if I give up the money in the bank, and depending on all of those things, I'll be in the unknown. I'll be in, what's going to happen now? It's going to create great feelings of insecurity. And so again, a double bind. So what helps? I think it's so important to understand that security for a child is really developed through two things. It's not just the external environment of safety physically and emotionally, but it's from connection to a rock, connection to a safe person who has more resources than I have, who's able to be there for me and support me and help me and protect me. Connection is a key part of that. But in complex trauma, if you didn't have connection, you were dependent on security only on trying to create a safe external world. Go back to building connection. Find safe people who can be a rock. But then learn to sit with the unknown, sit with some of that distressing feeling. So build your window of tolerance, being able to tolerate some uncomfortable emotions, anxiety that comes up around sitting in discomfort, sitting in the unknown, going through change. The final one, the affection and nurture double bind. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit on the self-compassion thing, but let me just present it to you this way. Sadly, some people in recovery long for touch, but then they resent it when they're touched. So it can come out of two things in their childhood. Number one, they never got touched. There was no warmth, there was no affection, there were no hugs in their life. So that core need was not met in them, and now they long for it, but when they experience it, it's just so uncomfortable, they just don't come close. It's like they got this massive bubble that they don't want anybody touching them, but they deep down long to be touched. Or the second scenario is they were in a family where there was lots of affection, but then it turned from healthy to unhealthy. It then turned to sexual abuse. And so now they long for healthy touch, but as soon as they feel it, they just bristle inside because this feels yucky. It's going to lead to something unhealthy. And so they're in a double bind. We need touch. We need that human contact and affection, but we need it to be healthy. We need it to be clean. And so again, people often in recovery struggle with this. And so to me, it's go slow, find a safe person, and just ask them, would you give me a hug? But keep it to 3 seconds, because that's probably all I can handle today. Or could you just touch my shoulder, touch me on the arm, and just hold it for 5 seconds? That's all I can handle. But just start, so call it titration. You just start to accept and allow safe touches with a safe person until you get more comfortable with it, until your nervous system is able to allow it without reacting or being triggered by it. That takes time. There's a lot of damage often to be undone. Some people then have to watch that the pendulum wants to swing too far. They then want to go into lots and lots and lots of constant touching, which can lead to kind of promiscuity and things that get them in trouble, back into unhealthy. So it's more of a subtle double bind that not everybody goes through, but some go through. And maybe you can relate to it. So such an important part of recovery is overcoming these double binds.